PwC has created an analytics dashboard that will save you time on executive reporting. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. And as a Tanium administrator, you likely get frequent requests for data exports from your manager and all the way up the chain, right? And enterprises have many sources of data, and Tanium is that rich epicenter of workstation and server reporting that we've all come to know and love, right? But executives want to see that beside other key data, like, for example, your network infrastructure and things like that. Well, that means you either spend weeks in Excel or you can use what we're going to show you today. And this is our first episode featuring a Tanium services partner. So welcome to the show, Bryon from PwC. Bryon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Deeply appreciate it. Bryon Blohm, I'm a director in our cyber risk and regulatory practice within PwC. I help lead our cyber analytics and doing more with data to help solve client challenges and problems. So thanks for having me today.
Well, thanks, Bryon. You know, for years, PwC has had a number of offerings that leverage Tanium on the back end. So today, I know of all the different offerings that you've got available, today we're going to talk about Leader Insights. And I know you did a talk on this at Converge, but a lot of folks didn't make it to Converge. We'll share a link for a recording of that later. But this is an episode specifically geared towards the Tanium admin and what you need to know about saving time in all those reporting requests and how PwC can help you with that. So, Bryon, tell us, what is Leader Insights?
Yeah, Leader Insights Analytics essentially takes the power, takes the data, and presents it in a storyline that's one, easy to consume, from the C-suite executives all the way down to the tactical doers, our engineers and architects in the trenches every day, and brings that together as a community, leveraging data from Tanium, but other data sources as well. And so how do we provide one consistent view that the organization, the community can rely on, is why Leader Insights exists. We know that we have challenges, and we'll get into some of those challenges here in just a minute, around how do we bring that together, how do we provide that crystal view, so that way data-driven decisions can be made by leaders, not just experiential knowledge, but we're combining that together to empower those folks within the organization.
And that's why people buy platform solutions like Tanium, because they need that data view that's reliable, trustworthy, fresh, accurate all across the environment. Those are all the reasons people buy Tanium. But what we're here to talk about today is that delivering on that, right? Here's the data that we actually need. And we all know there's a zillion different ways to get data out of Tanium. But this is going to turn it into an experience for the admin. It's pretty well hands off once it's kind of set it and forget it kind of thing. So once you've got that connectivity plumbed in, it's going to make your life easier as a Tanium admin. So take us through your deck and show us, what does this look like from the dashboard perspective?
Well, we'll start with the problem statement, understanding the why behind Leader Insights. What are we setting off to solve? What do we get from it if we deploy within our environment, or if we have PwC hosted for you? How do we bring those meaningful metrics together? How do we understand what those meaningful metrics are for your organization to support that storyline? Kind of getting down into the design, the different elements that are there, how we can use it within our organization, and then the logical data flow. We'll look at how it all comes together. And so first, starting with our problem statement, is a lot of organizations struggle with metrics. They struggle with reporting, getting the right type of reporting to the right type of leader on time, and really taking the burden off the staff who are the doers, right? They're fighting the fight every day. How do we keep them focused on that fight and enabling and protecting the organization while still getting the data to the leaders? And so when we think about this, providing that risk visibility through the power of the Tanium platform, using Connect, pulling that data out of the various modules that you have deployed within your environment, make those actual metrics that mean something to our leaders, to where they can push on different pieces and coordinate within the organization. And finally, wrap around the governance and reporting capability, again, taking the burden off the admins within the platform, and really kind of the power user group, and making that, again, shifting back to their daily jobs, but enabling those leaders to have that visibility into risk which is so important to provide that visibility, whether we're looking at from only a security practitioner's view, maybe partnering with the IT operations, and then communicating that over the business and ultimately protecting the business. That's what we're here to do, and that's the importance of leveraging the data out of Tanium, combining that data that we get with other security tools, IT operations tools within the environment, again, to provide that single pane of glass view.
Well, I tell you what I like about this is, the executives just want to get their job done. The Tanium administrators are, they have other things to do in IT ops or security, risk, whatever they're working on. And so I think what's really attractive about this is everybody can just keep doing their job once this is set up and going, and the data is just there. It's on tap, right? You just go hit the URL and you're good to go. You got what you need without taking additional time out of everybody's daily work, so to speak. I love it. Let's see it.
Yeah, one of the challenges we've heard along the way, and we have a CISO on the West Coast who really uses it as his platform for his program. He looks at it every morning when he gets in, see what's moved within the environment, and be able to take a look at that. But also on those random calls that he gets from the business to say, hey, what's our security posture? We're bidding on a new member group potentially, and we need to understand or be able to explain our posture. Can you give a brief synopsis? And he uses this as a backdrop when he has those type of conversations, kind of on demand, if you will, with near real-time data. And so as we're crafting that single pane of glass to provide the overall continuous monitoring, how do we have an executive look being able to present at any one time and really kind of bringing those different pieces together? Again, creating the community between the executive C-suite, those leaders who are really kind of overwatching on a day-to-day basis, and those tactical engineers in the trenches, all within one single pane of glass, so you can see what your right and left is doing as it affects our environment. And so that's fun. As we're thinking about how PwC sees metrics, able to communicate the analysis that would go along with the metrics, I think that's so important. We're really kind of seeing it in a pyramid, again, kind of working up to that C-suite by having that good base, and understanding those key KRIs that we want to make sure the C-suite or executive group knows. We'll take a look at a couple examples along the way. First here, taking a look at that executive C-suite, they need to know really the trend piece. They need to know where they're at from an organization. This view happens to be aligned to the NIST Common Security Framework. They've educated their C-suite and their board on what the 5 pillars of NIST Common Security Framework are. You see that on the left-hand side. And it allows the status to say, are we on trend, off trend? How are we trending? Where do we maybe have some areas? But again, we're keeping it high level, easy to consume for those folks that aren't security practitioners, but certainly need to know the security posture of the organization. Next, what we'll take a look at is understanding those IT and security leaders that are really driving the organization to achieve its goals on a day-to-day basis.
And let me just interject there one thing. So for our audience who's in the trenches of IT every day, your company makes widgets, let's say. And so your board is concerned about widgets and widget production. And sometimes IT kind of comes in from the side with, threat and risk to the business. And so these business leaders are thinking about the business. They're not thinking about IT vulnerabilities necessarily where we live every day. And so this is helping translate it up to their level. So yeah, this is really valuable.
That's great. I think that's a great point about, again, how do we get information? And again, from a leader's point of view and manager's point of view, they don't really necessarily, we want to make it about security and risk to the organization and protecting the organization, not necessarily about the tools that got us the information. And so we want to think about it from an IT and security lens, how they're kind of trained to think about it. And so that's why we want to harness that data coming out of Tanium and other sources. We'll take a look at that just in a second, and build a storyline that makes sense to your organization. I think that's the other key component here is this can flex, this can show different pieces. We can pull pieces on and off, and it's very much a living situation. So as we had Log4j last year that kind of impacted all of our holidays, we were able to put and bring on Log4j items that are key to that organization at that time, again, giving that near real-time living experience. And so as we take a look at kind of the leader view, we're looking at risk, we're looking at key insights, what's our tool distribution, key components at the leader level. And then what we want to do is make it simple to understand. Not everybody's a security practitioner. We fully get that. So how do we bring them along on the journey to say, this is where we should focus, from tying the metrics together, not just throwing numbers over the wall, but bringing people along, explaining how that's important in the impact statement to the organization. So from those critical high vulnerabilities, these amount can be exploited today. These have an exploit today. This amount of your population of your environment could be impacted. So let's use that information to prioritize the remediation that would apply to that.
Can we go back one screen?
Sure.
So I've got a question for you here. And I know some of our folks watching are thinking this. All right, I'm looking at some of these charts and it's like Tanium trends, Tanium reporting. We can kind of do some of this stuff already. So why would I need this? And I'm setting up this question. Why do I need PwC to come give you what I can already do at Tanium? And I know your response, because I want the audience to hear this response.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's really a mix, right? Because we get different data sources applied to different use cases. You may not own all the Tanium modules. Maybe we have a mix of a competitor or a different enabling tool to cover down on that use case. Again, we want to blend it into a single pane of glass. We love the reporting within Tanium and Benchmark and the other capabilities that are there today. But how do we blend that data and make sure that we have a holistic view around our environment? And so that's what Leader Insights is setting off to solve.
Yeah, specifically, I know you've got, threat intel that is outside of Tanium, right? That you can marry alongside that, like this map view of an asset, right? You can add value here, which is huge. So yeah, I want to interrupt your flow here, but I just want to call that out. It's important to see that there's a lot of enrichment that happens with the other data sources that come with Tanium right beside that makes a really good story.
I think the other key piece around blending data, a good story to understand, is blending it with the CMDB data. One of the challenges that we hear so often is, our CMDB may not be up to date. It may not be accurate. We've got questions around accuracy. We use Tanium Discover to be able to update that or be able to look at the differences that exist. And again, blending that CMDB data, and we'll show an example here in just a second, around with the asset data that's coming out of Tanium or another discovery tool is so critical, again, to be able to kind of get down to the why. When leaders see issues at this, the ability to drill in, look at that, and be able to push on that data is getting to the solutions, getting to the remediation, or at least planning for that remediation.
All right, let's keep going. I want to see the next screens. This is good.
All right. As we dig down to the security practitioners, those in the trenches, this kind of gets to the point Ashley was sharing with us around, looking at other data sources, using what's coming out of Tanium, if the customer owns asset or discover, and thinking about, when we think about from a true security practitioner's view of leveraging CIS or Center for Internet Security, the number one thing that they articulate is know your assets. And Tanium does such a great job at that. But how do we, again, take that data we're getting out of Tanium, blend it, whether we're trying to solve for vulnerability management, patch management, maybe sensitive data discovery, any number of different areas across the platform. But again, we need to know where these assets are so we can protect them. We need to know from a secure configuration standpoint. And so what we do is we, again, pull this data out, extrapolate it around how people think about IT operations and how people think about security by design. And so it's really purposeful in its design, but again, flexible to be able to tell the storyline that organizations need.
So I'm looking at your user interface here, and I know I got a preview of this last week as well. And so I'm looking down the left column here for the navigation, and we don't have to click through this, but just to talk to it. So, because this really clicked for me as you were explaining it. So the executive leadership, that's those folks who are going to click that level may not be the same folks that click the middle tier, which is kind of the middle management. And then this last click for architects, that's going to be those of us in the trenches. And that's our place, is patch management or endpoints and software management. That's what we do every day. So I really like the way that you've got this laid out so that the analytics dashboards are really tailored by audience. I like that. Yeah,
for some of those of us who have been around a long time around how many licks does it get to the center of the Tootsie Pop, right? We want to, how do we reduce your clicks? How do we reduce the burn, the friction, and make your lives easier around key focus areas, and also be able to translate and have those conversations with leadership that aren't as knowledgeable, right? Their focus is somewhere else, but we need to get them up to speed, or we need their insights or approval to move forward on some things. The way we lay this out is so that those conversations can be had at a moment's notice. And so that's the ease of use of it. One of the other areas, again, when we think about patch management, oftentimes we see organizations of all sizes potentially use different tools. Maybe a focus on Windows as SCCM. Maybe they're going to pivot to Tanium deploy down the road, or maybe they use different pushes for their Linux environments, as an example. But again, we need to blend that data together so we can provide a holistic view. And so that's why on top of Benchmark, we have Patch and some of the others that are listed there. And that's the value. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll kind of pivot a little bit and think about, again, these are very much flexible as far as a storyline perspective to what you need to solve within your organization. And typically we see organizations really of all sizes. I think on the smaller side, those with maybe 1,000 endpoints to 15,000 endpoints that don't have an analytics department, but know the art of the possible is out there, and they want to be able to harness that data and give some of these executive views building out. And so we can build these and host them for you. Or conversely, maybe there's a larger organization, they're 150,000 endpoints and above, but want really the storyline to be built out. And so as we look at this from left to right, kind of the three different views that we have, kind of tactical leader's view, being able to express in the three layers we took a look at, automating controls. Maybe there's a SOC 2 requirement or other 853 requirements, and how do we automate that experience, even pieces from the cloud to on-prem as organizations pivot. And then finally, maybe it's a PE organization or kind of a large organization that has opcos, business units, subsidiaries, and the ability to look at 20 or 30 different businesses across the way, especially with Tanium Cloud now, being able to look at the different opcos is quite helpful, but being able, knowing that they're often managed probably in a different way. And so each of these three views is how we see organizations really harness this power.
So I see here subsidiaries and business units, and that's, I mean, that's what we do at the tactical level in the Tanium consoles. We're creating computer groups that represent those business units, but we also have RBAC that helps tailor access. So I'm curious, from your solution side, it's abstracted, right? This data is coming out of Tanium, being put alongside other data in this analytics dashboard. So how do you manage RBAC coming back into Tanium then to make sure people can only see what they're supposed to see?
Yep, and so we that's part of the design model as we establish that. So if we're building it within the client's environment, we'll definitely establish the RBAC with how they're going to manage it going forward. If PwC hosts it, we'll have it within our requirements, kind of roles, responsibilities, to say this person's at this level and they can see this type of information as an example. And so that's really how we structure and protect it and make sure the right information. The other thing is, as we're building the storyline, there is different organizations handle it different ways in a sense of what they can drill down to. So we can build this in such a way, and some organizations want to be able to see the data all the way down to the computer's name, right? And be able to tie that out because of the type of use cases they want to accomplish. Others want to stay at the high level numbers. And so that's during that build phase and design phase, questions we'll ask to say, is this ready to be shared with a broad audience? Do we need to narrow the scope to roles and responsibilities and break it down and control the data and who gets to see the data?
So I've heard you drop in there a couple of times, if PwC hosts it. So what does the hosting look like for this? Is this something customers install on-prem in their own cloud instance, and PwC, where does it live?
Yeah, depending upon the needs of the customer, it can absolutely be built within the client's environment. If they want to take on the analytics and support, they already have an analytics data warehouse, an analytics platform already set up. Great, let's build it in your environment. Or conversely, if that analytics team is already overwhelmed with the projects that they have and they need some hosting, we have a SaaS platform capability where we can host it for you. We provide that service throughout the support period.
And I heard that keyword build in there. So obviously this is templated, but it's not cookie cutter necessarily.
Right.
So it has to be adapted to each organization. So what's a typical timeline look like to get this up and going?
Yes, we take you on an experience, right, of picking out the items, and hopefully it's a little bit more exciting than picking out colors at Home Depot on Saturday. But as we take you along on this process, we want to make sure, again, we start with the storyline, and certainly articulate that a couple of times, because it's important to tie the message to the personas, to our audience who's going to be reading that, right? And so as we look at that, we'll have a perspective of, hey, these are important things. These are relevant today in the marketplace from a cybersecurity perspective. When we look at it from a risk lens, this is what we recommend. But each organization also has identified what they believe is important, because it is important to them. And so we want to take that and build that as the primary and wrap around that to add that additional sauce to make sure they see that holistic picture.
Well, if I keep asking you questions, we're not going to get through your deck. Let's keep going.
Yeah, just a couple things more we want to be able to share with the team. Again, we talked about building to personas, making sure the message is on point. So when we took a look at that C-suite, that board view, we took a look at the high-level metrics around this cybersecurity framework. Then we broke it down and started giving details around that leader group and then the tactical doers. And this can change and morph, again, to any organization, but making sure that the right people have the right information at the right time and that near real-time experience is so critical to making sure this gets moved along and we achieve our outcome, which is informing people and reducing risk to the organization. One of the things that you had asked earlier in the conversation was around how do we bring in additional information? So not only additional information within the organization and other tools they have, but also enriched information around threat intel data. So PwC has a global threat intel team that looks across all the incidents and events that are going on in the world. We're able to report back by industry, by what happened. So that way security architects, engineers, as they're asked questions is saying, hey, I understand there was a breach at another organization, not our own, but what happened and what should we be considering at our organization? Can we look at our controls that we have in place? That's probably going to come up in the next meeting. We want to be prepared. And what it does is allow you to get in there, take a look at the latest events, the latest incidents, see what happened, see the threat actor group that potentially did that active or that action, and then be able to correlate back that to your organization, say, do we have these things in place and how are we defending ourselves? Or looking at the other incidents, maybe in your industry, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, FS, as it applies.
Yeah, that seems like the real value add to me here, because it's not so you've got the data, right? But now we're taking that and putting it beside global intel. That's really a service that PwC provides. So all of a sudden now it's contextualized to my environment, and where do I line up against the profile that we're seeing in the industry at large? That's really valuable.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the fun things along the way is to say, be able to look at your left and right to say, hey, even within our own industry, maybe we compete with these folks, but let's pair together from a risk standpoint to reduce the risk to all of us and gain those insights, gain those learnings from others. Again, we took a look at our risk chain where we're bringing those metrics together, making them meaningful, helping those folks who maybe not be IT operations and security operations practitioners on a day-to-day basis, and putting forth those key metrics that are important to our leaders. So now we'll pivot a bit and take a look at, and we talked about for a while, other data sources beyond Tanium, whether it's our global threat intel data, whether it's ServiceNow CMDB, other CMDB data, and really looking at this in how we aggregate the data, contextualize the information, provide that risk analysis, and then visualize the story into leader insights. You know, the dashboards that we took a look at are just the front end. It's the analysis that's over the top of it and the analytics behind it to help bring each of these pieces together of where these critical items, these data sets sit. So ultimately, we can look at risk within an organization.
Yeah, and I see big names in there like ServiceNow and Microsoft, big partners. And that's the whole strategic platform play, is putting these platforms in operation with some of those pre-built integrations, get it all strung together, and then you've got this nice overlay on top of it with the value add from PwC. I like it.
It's great. Yeah, we think about different use cases and different technologies, whether it's, a technical use case, maybe it's a process use case. And again, blending that all into that single pane of glass for our leaders to be able to make those decisions. And finally, the benefits of the platform. As we began our conversation, we talked about reducing burden on our staff, providing that common operating picture to our leaders, maintaining insight around control, risk that we have within the organization, and getting the value out of the tools. So often what we hear from organizations is, especially the leaders, is, hey, I paid a lot for a tool. Is the efficacy of the tool fully deployed? We can look at that leveraging Tanium back on the asset page. But how do I, as a leader that may have grown up as a technical person, get the value of what I'm paying for? Pulling that data out of the trenches, pulling that data out of the console, putting it in front of the leader so that they get the value from what they're paying for, what they're asking for to reduce that risk, and then making sure that the data is at the ready for them as they have conversations come up and they need to explain questions or get early insights and help be a part of the team to look at those trends and make sure that they're on point.
One of the questions that I hear from customers frequently is, what are other customers doing with Tanium, right? And that's really, I think, the value that PwC brings here, is because you guys are talking to people around the world and you're on the forefront of addressing a lot of these concerns from a services perspective and providing rich tooling like this. So you know what are the concerns before people ask sometimes, and that's really the value I see coming out of this.
Yeah, we'll definitely want to share a point of view and then hear from the customer, right? We want to hear those pain points, those problems, those challenges, and so we can bring the right type of use cases, the right type of ideas together and collaborate as a team to see where we can reduce that friction and ultimately enable the team to have a better risk posture. So it's great. So thank you for the opportunity to present and talk with you today. A couple of key takeaways as we think about this is, creating that at the ready view, building a community through a common operating picture, a common lens, and then being able to provide that data for those leaders to make those decisions. And so as you're thinking about it, deeply appreciate your time again as we're thinking about leader insights analytics.
Well, Bryon, thanks for joining us today. And I know this is a little bit of a different spin on Tanium Tech Talks. We're taking it up a notch because normally we're in the weeds, but it's good every now and then for us to poke our head up, the gopher, right? Poke your head up out of the hole and look around. Okay, what's the business really need? And how does what I do in the trenches really contribute to what the business is getting and helping them enable good, solid business decisions? And that's what we are doing here as Tanium administrators, serving up this premium data can be integrated and put alongside this other context. So thanks again for joining us, Bryon. We've got your contact information here for you and John on the screen as well, so folks can reach out to you directly if they'd like to get more information on how to use this and how to engage PwC for this service in their environment. So it's our pleasure here at Tanium to provide you an opportunity like this to meet some of our partners and see what they're doing with Tanium data. Also in the show notes down below, I've got a couple extra clicks for you down there as well. So there's a link to our Tanium.com page where we feature our PwC partnership and some of the other things that they offer there as well. And also a link to our Converge.Tanium.com. I know some of you are tired of hearing me say Converge.Tanium.com because we talk about it all year. But Converge, every year PwC is usually a sponsor and their speaker, and Bryon was there this last year, and they had another session as well. So I've got a link to our Converge site, and I got a link to the specific breakout agenda there. You might have to make sure you're authenticated, you've got your Converge on-demand account set up, and then you can use that link to get straight into the list of breakouts where there's 2 different breakouts that you can get additional information from other things that PwC is doing with Tanium. So that wraps up this interesting angle on Tanium data today for Tanium Tech Talks. So until next time, go Tanium.